and welcome to Athlantic, the show where an American and a Brit take turns crossing the pond to learn about sport culture in the UK and the USA. I'm Adam Jordan, your resident American.
And I'm Harry Collins, your resident Brit. It's March, Adam. I'm sure this is a very quiet time in sport, just all around the world. There's no wonder what we're going to talk about for the next month or so. What a quiet time.
Yeah.
What a really placid time in global sport.
We're really in the doldrums of sports, especially over here. I mean, I texted you this week. I was walking through my neighborhood one night and saw stadium lights in the distance and happened to stumble upon a rugby game happening. And I was like, wow, it might be the only, it's like a professional rugby league here that's very small. And I was like, yeah, it might be the only sports happening right now around this time of year here in America. I
don't check my texts from Adam, so I didn't know.
Oh, so you didn't even know about that? Oh, well, okay. Well, that explains. I've been talking to myself a lot recently then.
Are you excited for March Madness?
I am excited for March Madness. I'm more excited now because our beloved University of North Carolina, we are actually, as of today, on a 5-game winning streak, which is our longest of the season. We have been a very, very bad team this year on the men's side. The women's side has been very, very good. But on the men's side, we've been really struggling, but we may be starting to get our act together at the right time here to play our way into the tournament. But yes, maybe there'll be some March Madness content coming soon. I don't know. We'll see.
Excellent.
Yeah, I'm really excited. So have you, other than like when you were in America, do you like watch March Madness at all? Like, do you interact with it at all?
I try to, as the case is with like every sports event in the US, it really like genuinely depends on what side of your country it's being played in. I know that it moves around, but watching, I try to watch the Daytona 500, as we mentioned after the last between the podcast. We had Daytona 500, and that was in quite a useful part of America to watch. It's the time zones are pretty tight. I didn't have to stay up super late, and then it was red flagged, so great. I did not end up watching it.
I don't know.
But March Madness, I do. I watch as much as I can.
Yeah.
Especially the UNC games.
Yeah.
But typically it'll be like I'm going to catch the first half, and if we're winning, I'll go to sleep.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Well, hopefully you have Carolina to watch this year. But we've got 2 more regular season games left as we're recording, and then conference tournaments. The women have 1 game left, and then into their conference tournament next week. And I'll be at both of them, so I'm very excited. I'll get to see see both teams. So, it'll be really fun. The Daytona 500, won't go into it too much. Very weird. It feels like it gets red flagged every year. Go figure. It's in Florida, and the time of year where the weather starts turning toward being a little rainier, a little stormier, and I have a lot of thoughts on the Daytona 500 that we can talk about in another episode, including.
Sure.
My question that I've been asking, which is America sports washing now? I don't know. We'll have to dive into that at some point. But I'm not going to let us get onto that today because we've got a lot to get to. I have one more thing before we get to our sport math teaser, and then we'll get into the main body of the episode. So, wanted to give a quick update on the Ottawa Senators.
Yes.
Couple of things. So we've gotten out of the Four Nations face-off now. We are just like a week away from the trade deadline as we're recording. So we are in a place where like teams are really starting to get to crunch time.
I'm available.
Yes.
I've not heard from anyone.
Keep waiting by the phone.
I can't ice skate. I think that's a big limiting factor.
It might be, depending on what team. There's some teams in the NHL that look like they don't have any skaters either. So, totally fine. That may not preclude you from making your NHL debut this year.
Did you enjoy the Four Nations?
I loved the Four Nations. I was very upset, and again, this goes back to the sports washing thing. Not that this is sports washing, but sure. Like, I was really glad to see that it performed very well here. I think if the goal was to grow the game and get more people watching and talking about hockey, undeniably success. I think the final the final game, I think, drew almost 10 million viewers, which was a record for any hockey game period that was not an Olympic hockey game in the U.S.
My dad was one of them.
Whoa, really?
My dad out of nowhere got really into it.
Oh, that's awesome.
Followed it. It texted me like live updates from the Canada USA brawl. He was like, yes, there's like been 3 fights in the first 15 seconds. And I was like, yes. Excellent.
Yes. Yeah. I saw so many people that I follow for, on social media, sports personalities that I follow that have never talked about hockey, talking about that game. And, that's what you love to see. I hate that it got tied up with all of the things happening in our current administration, but it at least got attention on things. I guess we can say that.
Is it gonna be like an annual thing? Are we getting it again?
So
surely it was popular enough to do it again.
Yeah, totally. And also, shout out Alan Collins. Thank you very much for tuning into the lovely sport. I cannot wait to talk about it with you when I finally get to meet you here in a couple months. Sorry, point of personal privilege. So the tournament itself, the Four Nations format, really unlikely that will continue. But the NHL did announce that because the part of the reason for doing it this year is to get the players kind of back ready and to play in international competition again ahead of the Olympics next year, because it'll be the first time that NHL players have been in the Olympics since 2014. So,
oh, cool.
Very excited for that. So they'll take an Olympic break in the middle of the season next year. The following year, they won't have an international tournament. But then the year after that, 2028, we'll go to a World Cup format. And then we'll alternate every 2 years. There'll be an Olympics, then there'll be a World Cup, an Olympics, and then a World Cup. So
that's cool.
Four Nations won't be on the table, but the good news is we'll invite way more people to the party. So
Ace.
Yeah, it's really fun and unique circumstances. I mean, the fact that there hadn't been this kind of competition in a while, I think really, added to the buzz behind it. But regardless, just super cool event, and I'm so glad that it went well.
It's fun to be optimistic about like the future of sport.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of what unfortunately we talk about like into the future, we're like, oh, I hope this doesn't get worse.
Yeah.
Hey, really cool. I hope this gets better and better.
Great point. You're so right on that. That is I think, honestly, with a lot of things in the world, there's a lot of people having, negative outlooks for a lot of institutions. So it is sure. Really cool. It's refreshing in a way to see people so excited about something and be excited about the growth. You said that very well. But sure anyway, was not meaning to talk about the Four Nations. I'm glad we did. I knew we would at some point. But so since the Four Nations break, the Senators have been okay, not great. I could say we are now sitting at 4. We're sitting at 4 points outside of the playoffs, looking in the wild card spot. So again, the top 3 teams in how am I going to say this? The top 3 teams in each division make it to the playoffs automatically. And if you're not in those top 3 teams in your division, if you're one of the 2 other best records in the whole conference, so East or West, you make it to the playoffs. So 4 points out of the playoffs, you get 2 points for a win, 1 point for an overtime loss in the NHL. So it's very, very doable, but there's a lot of teams vying for the same spot with them. So
sure.
Bit of an uphill battle. Our boy Tim Stützle is still at a point per game pace. We love it. Go Germans.
Is that good?
It is good. Yeah. So if you're at a point per game,
nice.
that is
Europeans.
Yes. Yeah. Woo.
Cool.
Woo. Germany was not part of the Four Nations face-off, but they will be part of the Olympics and the World Cup of Hockey. So hopefully we'll get to see Tim Stützle on the international stage sometime sooner rather than later.
Just for visibility across the NHL, who is the favorite this year, do you reckon?
I would say the Florida Panthers are probably primed again to go on a deep run. They won the Stanley Cup last year, and they look like an absolute wagon again this year. The Washington Capitals, as much as it pains my heart to say, they're the Crystal Palace to the Pittsburgh Penguins. To what Brighton are to Crystal Palace. And anyway, I would say they're really good. The Edmonton Oilers are a big they made the final last year. They'll look to be back again. The LA Kings are really good. There's a lot of teams kind of in that mix,
Cool.
But the Panthers are probably if I had to place a bet, which may be a theme of this episode, I would probably place my bet right now on the Florida Panthers to repeat as Stanley Cup champions. The last two things before we get into our main topic, I actually may have a chance to go see the Ottawa Senators in person here at the end of the month. Yeah, I know.
Cool.
Unfortunately, I won't be able to go up to Canada to see them, but very fortunately, I'll be able to go see them when they play the Penguins in Pittsburgh. So
Wicked.
we shall see. I'll report live if that does happen.
Incredible.
Okay, so before we get into our main topic, last thing, we want to give a preview of the sport math question that we'll ask that I'll ask Harry at the end of our conversation. If you remember last week, we did it this way where I gave Harry and all of you listening at home the question, so you have some more time to ponder it, think about it, so we have a little bit less time at the end. Just sitting there thinking while Harry tries to figure things out in real time. Okay, we've also one other thing. We've also added a point system to try to keep ourselves a little bit more competitive on the sport math. So you get a point for each of the trivia questions that you get right in the 3-part trivia question, and then you'll get a bonus point if you get the final number in the sport math correct. So the points lean more toward the sport than the math, which I think is good for at least me.
Yes.
I don't know about you, Harry, but probably for both of us.
The English education system has properly failed me.
Incredible. Incredible. All right, well, that's good to know.
Adam had to tell me what to the power of meant again.
Yeah, spoiler alert. We're gonna go with exponents in this one. All right, so the sport math question today. Here we go. So there are 3 clubs that share the streak for the longest current tenure in the EFL Championship. So the question is, I want to know how many years that each of those 3 clubs have been in the championship.
Yeah. But do you want me to know the clubs?
Yes, I do. So the clubs, as a hint, I was going to be nice, but now I kind of don't want you to because you asked for it. I was going to be nice. No, let me make sure. Yes, okay, I do have them written down. So it's Bristol, it is QPR, and it is Preston North End is your hint.
Okay.
So those 3 have been in the championship for the longest amount of time in their current streak, and they've all been the 3 Musketeers together. So let's take that number, the amount of years that they've been, to the power of the jersey number of the New York Yankee with the most hits in that franchise's history.
Okay.
Plus, a topical one, the number of times that England have won the men's 6 Nations.
Okay.
Fair enough.
I think I know one of those. I'm gonna spend the next 25 minutes trying to work out the other 2.
With how much you've talked up the 6 Nations, I'm not expecting, like, you can be a fan of it without knowing those specific numbers, but you've talked it up a lot, so I hope that's the one. I'll be impressed with any of them, to be honest, though. So this will be a fun one.
All right, amazing.
All right,
Adam, what are we talking about this week?
Yes, so if you couldn't tell by the title of the episode that you've clicked on, I don't know what we're going to title this episode yet. So that's a question for me of the future. But sports betting, sports gambling has been a massive story over here in the U.S. over the past 5 to 7 years. Really, this all started because of a couple things. One, I've just been curious, okay, it's blowing up here. What's it look like over there? What's the culture behind it? Has it been a thing for longer? I would imagine so. We're going to find that out together. And the other piece was I've noticed this, and it's something that's really, really bothered me about watching sports over the past, since this proliferation of sports betting in the U.S. I've noticed that a lot of the commentary among fans in sports, a lot of the language that people are using, will be more so than ever when a call doesn't go the way that they want. And you saw this a lot with the Kansas City Chiefs run to the Super Bowl, really over the past 3 years. That people in the comment section, people out at the bar, people you're just talking to, will straight up say that the game is rigged. They will straight up believe that the referees are being paid off or are being influenced by gambling. And I'm not, maybe there is that. I'm not saying that that's an impossible solution. But I think we get to a very dangerous place in our rhetoric on sports when that becomes, in the conversation around sports, when that becomes the rhetoric that we're using, and we actually believe that. I see especially in the Premier League and football, a lot of the same rhetorics sort of being pushed a lot, especially on social media, especially in those echo chambers. But unfortunately, in the Premier League, we're working out to a backdrop of actual cheating, which is taking up a big. There's a massive shadow of a very real possible cheating episode by a champion winning team. So that only intensifies this point about are things rigged. So really, what I'm hearing is that Manchester City. So Pep is a fraud. The Centurions not real. That was a failed attempt by the Premier League. Not real.
Numbers don't go that high.
Yeah, they don't.
Yep,
they don't.
Exactly.
We can't count to 100. You certainly can't count to 100. No. I certainly can't either. I'm not one to talk. But okay, go ahead. You're about to say something.
Well, so you mentioned that sport betting is starting to become a far more prevalent thing in American sports over the last, you said, 5 to 7 years.
Yes.
What happened 7 years ago?
Great question. Funny you should ask. So, I believe the law was enacted sometime in the 90s. It was later than you would think, given the culture, and we'll get into this, given the culture of gambling in the United States for years, especially on sports. But I believe it was in the 90s. There was a law passed that basically outlawed sports gambling everywhere except for Nevada. Obviously, Nevada keeping that legal because of the casinos in Las Vegas, world famous for gambling. They weren't going to get rid of that.
Sure.
In 2018, there was a Supreme Court case that overturned that law. The Supreme Court loves to overturn precedent and overturn laws these days, and that was one of them. And they ruled that you can't make it nationally illegal to wager on sports, which a lot of people, whatever your take on it, that became the law of the land. And it didn't say that, hey, all of a sudden gambling is legal everywhere, everybody can do it unregulated. It just basically said that, hey, states can make whatever regulations they want.
Sure.
So starting in 2018, you started to see a slow trickle of certain states would pass laws saying, okay, we're going to, you can gamble in this state at a casino, but not online. Okay, in this state, in Massachusetts, you can gamble online. In California, you can't. I'm just making that up for those specific examples. But it's basically now legal in with different caveats as to how it might be legal. But in 48 of the 50 states, it is legal now to sports gamble, where, again, less than a decade ago, it was completely illegal. All of the sports gambling was happening either at a casino in Las Vegas or underground in back channel ways. So,
first question.
Yeah.
The Kentucky Derby is one of the biggest horse racing events on the international calendar. Are you telling me before 2018 they were just doing that for fun?
So,
and no one was gambling on horses?
Yeah, it was actually...
Because I've got 10 minutes of content on horses written here. But was that like a dry event? Is that no gambling?
Horses don't exist in the United States, Harry. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what in the world you're talking about. No, there's been legal gambling on the U.S. sorry, what am I saying? There's been legal gambling on horse racing. That's been legal for a while.
Right. Okay.
We're differentiating between like human sports, I suppose. People would there were some back in like the 19th century there were some prohibitions on it, and I think still certain states wouldn't allow it. And to be completely honest, I'm not exactly sure what the state of things was in what the state of things was kind of in that 90s 2000s period for every single horse race in America.
Yeah, of course,
but the biggest ones like Kentucky Derby, long story short, yes, you could gamble on those. So,
but the shift now is people are betting on football, baseball,
right.
The hockey, the major leagues, probably NASCAR as well.
Yeah, I mean, literally any sport. People are gambling on international sports. People are gambling like it. If there is a sport that you can, if there's something to gamble on, you can gamble on it here pretty much for the most part. So,
it's surprising to me, having grown up in the UK where sports gambling is far freer, that this is one of those things kind of like drinking, where you're surprised that there's so many limits in the US.
Yeah. Okay. So that's what that was going to be my first question for you. So like and I don't know how much, this is a cultural difference, as I think you were just alluding to. Like, I think the US has had a more of this is a sin. Like gambling is a sinful behavior. It's not, this is not something that should be accepted by society. It should be relegated to the shadows. Like it's an undesirable behavior. I can't imagine that the UK and its long history has always thought, has always been far more progressive than the U.S. has been on the issue. But has it been illegal? Is it legal over there? What's the landscape look like, and how much of the conversation does it take up?
So, great question. The earliest legislation against gambling that I could find during our research was the Unlawful Games Act of 1541. Just a cool 300 years before your nation was founded. And the Unlawful Games Act made virtually all gambling illegal, but was not enforced. What it was actually used for was to make sure that you could not use legal recourse to recover gambling debts. So while it made gambling illegal, people still gambled. But if you were caught and somebody had run off with your takings, or they hadn't paid up, you couldn't use the courts to recover that money. So there's that slight division, that slight sin.
And obviously the sports landscape very different in the 1540s than in
that was
the 2020s.
That was the year after Tottenham won their last league title. Then obviously we've had lotteries and things, but focusing mostly on sports gambling, as I sort of pushed towards earlier, it was very closely linked with horse racing. And actually the history of the way that gambling has progressed in the UK has been the crazy intersection between horses and massive technological achievement. People would bet on local horse racing in their community, but it didn't really get much traction until we came up with trains. And now you can move the horses and you can move people to bigger towns where you can watch horse racing. And then we invented the telegram, and you don't have to be in a location to know the result of a horse race. And of course, then we start applying that to other sports as well. And suddenly, we see how gambling explodes across the UK, which is an interesting thing that we don't get to see in the evolution of American sports, because 21-year-old Americans who didn't drink when they were younger than 21,
I certainly did.
In 2018, you made it legal, and you've already got all the infrastructure. You've got the internet, and you've got mobile phone apps that can put gambling straight in your pocket. You didn't have this half millennium of progress that we astute 18-year-old legal drinkers in the UK had. And that's why I think it's all gone a bit potty in the US. I think sports gambling is far more ingrained into the sports, the landscape of enjoying sports as an entertainment. It's an accessory that I think is probably, I think it's probably slightly healthier just because it's not so profoundly new. But on the other side of that, the issues with that industry are far more deeply rooted, and I think the very tip of the problem is probably worse in the UK. Like gambling addiction and its intersection between gambling addiction and like men's mental health, and then like men's suicide rates.
Yeah.
There are very, very strong correlations. And as we're going to speak on as we push through, the industry, while we say it's not sin, it is predatory, and it gets aggressive, and it's a industry where they want you to lose, and they want you to lose as much as possible. And unfortunately, we're now in a place where they can push losing to a great effect.
Yeah. Has that changed a lot over, I mean, really in our lifetimes? Like, have you noticed, I mean, obviously the whole world has changed with smartphones being ubiquitous and that being like our main way of doing everything now. You know, I have never grown up. I mean, outside of, again, there were bookies, there was Vegas, there were people that you could, you know, do these things through. But I've never grown up or, you know, been around at a time where legally there was anything but, you know, the DraftKings, the FanDuel app on your phone that you can just go through and place a 10-leg parlay and, you know, and hope for the best.
So I think the primary issue, and this is sort of going to be the theme here, is it's I hate this word so much. I'm not a LinkedIn baby, but it's like frictionless. It's way easier. It's way easier to get.
This guy's out here waking up at 4 a.m, going on a 10-mile run before the sun rises. He's ready to go. He's grinding out here.
I've got to lose all my life savings before the sun is up. Yeah, we're you know, when it's in your pocket, oh my days, it's so easy to go. When you're watching, you know, if you're watching a football game, some of the ads at halftime will be ads on specifically referencing a new market that they've opened based on the game that's going on. So if you've just watched 45 minutes of football and you were like, "Guy, I don't think Haaland's going to score today," and then at halftime, you know, one of the big betting houses is like, "Hey, these are the odds if Haaland is going to score in the next 45 minutes." It's just, it's so visible, and now it's so loud. It's very, very hard to ignore.
Yeah.
But for accessibility, before phones, we have like betting houses and you know, like literal like shop fronts where you go in and there's always like horse racing on, and you can like place bets with a bookie there. Do you have those in the US?
We've never, I mean, again, there wasn't the infrastructure for that. I mean, there's stuff like that that's underground that you could, you know, you could access, like, and this isn't me like being like coy here. Like I never, you know, engaged with this. I'm not saying that to like be, you know, morally anything or to make like I just genuinely never interacted with it myself. I know people that, you know, they had, you know, some links through websites where you could do it. Like you could still do it on your phone. It just like looked a little bit different.
Yeah.
But and this could be a blind spot for me, but I never knew of any places that you could go, you know, physically go outside of a casino. Which
I think,
yeah.
Well, I think weirdly, casinos far rarer in the UK.
Yeah.
I think a law was changed in the 90s where like casinos were then like sort of, you know, not legalized, but the barriers to having a casino were reduced. And then there was this plan for like a mega casino in Manchester that was like mothballed in the early 2000s. But I think all of our like British listeners will know immediately, will be able to see in their mind's eye like the Coral, the Ladbrokes, the William Hill shops that you can go in, take a docket, hand your money over to the little guy who sits in a window.
Yeah.
And then bet on almost anything.
Yeah.
I've done that. Me and a friend that I worked with, I work in hospitality, and we were tipped. Having like cash tips are quite rare in the type of hospitality that I do.
Sure.
So instead of keeping £2.50 each, we went and we put a fiver on a horse that was running in Ascot that day. We chose between two horses. One of them won at a 72-1 outsider, and we put it on the other one. Yeah, we put it on the other one and lost everything. But yeah, so I think gambling far more visible. Unfortunately, these shops, these betting houses, are obviously far more prevalent in economically impoverished areas.
Yeah.
As part of that, like predatory element of the industry.
Yeah.
You will find betting shops lined up in former industrial towns and things like that, where they're preying on that potential.
People who are desperate for money, and the people who totally. It's interesting because we don't have like those kind of like books, like those kind of shops like up, but I mean, here in Charlotte I see it all the time. I see it all throughout North Carolina. There's like illegal casinos that like they have signs out front that basically say like, hey, this is an arcade, but like they're not. They're casinos, and you really only see them in neighborhoods that have are the more impoverished, or just that are the least wealthy. So it is very it's definitely very predatory in terms of the marketing here, but I could totally see where you're coming from. We don't have that kind of thing since gambling was legalized in 2018. Sports betting. Some of the ways that certain states legalized it is they wouldn't legalize the online gambling, so you couldn't just go on your computer or your phone and place bets. But they legalized creating a sports book. So actually, my first and really only experience like with legal betting was when I lived in Washington, D.C. They had just made it legal to create sports books, and right next to the arena where the Capitals and the Wizards play, they built a Caesars sportsbook. So Caesars Casino built a branded sportsbook, and you can go in there and watch any game. I mean, it's like a huge sports bar, sports lounge. It's amazing. They've got great food. They've got a zillion TVs. You can go up to physical machines and place bets on anything happening. I mean, it's like a casino in Las Vegas, except it's plopped in the middle of Washington, D.C. And I went with my dad when it opened, just because he was coming to visit, and we wanted to check it out and see what it was about. And he'd been to Vegas and done it before, but I'd never done it before, and I put a bet down on a Penguins game, and I hated it. I had such a bad time because I'm the kind of person that like. I don't need extra stress on my sporting bet. Like, I don't see it as excitement. I see it as stress, which I think probably says something about me. But it was fascinating to me. Like, just the whole idea of being able to go there and do that was really interesting, and I could totally see how it sucks you in. So okay, do we want to continue on this? We're doing a little live show making here. In real time. Do we want to continue on the path of how this is marketed, how this has changed over time, how it's grown here? Or do we want to go into some of the integrity pieces that we've talked about?
I think to segue towards the integrity and then get back to that earlier point about how the Super Bowl was rigged.
Yeah.
Is like that's an important bridge and quite a pertinent issue at the moment, because if you're noticing that rise with gambling, with sports betting, it's so interesting that that association's being drawn when probably a lot of our the most famous match fixing probably happened before 2018. There are definitely cases. I've got a couple of cases here that in the UK that have been quite recent. But are there any sort of integrity issues that have arisen that we know are concrete and real examples since 2018, or are they mostly before?
Have you ever heard of or seen the movie 8 Man Out?
No.
Okay. So there was
never heard that collection of words before in my life.
Okay, incredible. So there's a movie called 8 Man Out that's about probably the most famous scandal of the 20th century in professional sports, which was in 1919, the World Series between the Chicago White Sox and the Cincinnati Reds. The Reds won the World Series in 1919. You can still see the sign, the banner up in their ballpark today. But that World Series has a massive asterisk because it came out that 8 players on the Chicago White Sox were straight up paid to throw the series. They committed errors that they never committed. They hit terribly in the World Series, in the pinnacle of the sport. They were paid off to throw the games, and all 8 of the players that were part of it got kicked out of baseball, and that set a precedent. Yeah, they got completely kicked out of the game, and that set a precedent. Really, I mean, throughout baseball, but also really through the entirety of major professional sports in North America. That was the line. So they got kicked out of baseball. You didn't really see any other major scandals. Because this was by the point where baseball was starting to become the power that it was by the middle of the 20th century in America. And then we didn't really see another scandal or anything like that until the 1980s when it came out that Pete Rose, who actually coincidentally played for the Cincinnati Reds for the majority of his career, probably the greatest hitter to ever play the game, or within the top 3 to 5 greatest hitters to ever play the game, has more hits than anybody ever. When he was managing later in his career, and then questionably while he was playing, it came out that he gambled on games, and some that he wasn't involved in, some that he was involved in, and he got kicked out of baseball. He got banned from baseball by the commissioner at the time. That a lot of people wanted to see him reinstated. No commissioner ever did it. And Pete Rose actually just passed about a year ago. Still banned from baseball. And just a absolutely fascinating story that the greatest player, one of the greatest players in the game's history, is not in the Hall of Fame because of this scandal.
Because of that tarnished reputation.
Yeah, and I've got a few more to get to, but it sounds like there's been some on that side of things too.
Well, I'm really glad you said that was the most shocking scandal of the 20th century, because the most shocking scandal of the 21st century was obviously Piegate, which I'm sure made massive waves in the US.
Oh yeah, I think it was somewhere between Deflategate and Spygate.
Yes,
and actual Watergate.
I would say this was as big as Watergate. In 2015, do I remember which team? I believe it was a team called Sutton, which are in London, where I am, played Arsenal in the FA Cup, and it was a televised game. Now, the only interesting thing about the game that I think it finished 2-0 was a company called Sun Bets, which is a subsidiary of the Sun newspaper, which is one of those awful,
very reputable news source, from my understanding.
Yes, exactly. They opened a market on Wayne Shaw, who was the Sutton second goalkeeper. So he's on the bench. The thing that you need to know about Wayne Shaw is he's 45, or he was 45, and he's not your typical athlete. He's 45. He's quite a large guy.
Okay.
He I think was their goalkeeper coach, but was just drafted in and registered to play that game. Sunbet saw his unathletic build and, as a joke, opened a market on whether or not he would eat a pie while he was sat on the bench. Now, it was brought to his attention. Firstly, that's incredibly insulting.
That's a terrible thing to do.
If someone came and told you and said, "Hey, this awful organization have opened a market because they think that you're gonna eat something during a game because of the way you look," I would 100% want to take advantage of that.
Yeah.
So he did eat a pie during the game. A lot of people made a lot of money, and it was immediately tied back to he'd been sort of tipped off to do it. I think friends and family were sort of involved. He was given a ban, but obviously it doesn't really matter because he's not the player. He was just on the bench to fill a spot.
I'm sorry, but that money had to be. That money had better have been life changing, because otherwise, if somebody came to me, like you said, if somebody came to him in that circumstances and said "Hey, because of the way you look, we're gonna do this," and the fact that person wasn't just didn't catch hands immediately is crazy.
Yeah, exactly. But opening that, they opened the market. He didn't somebody else opened the market, and these the
I guess. But still, wild.
It's been but that's so rude.
Yeah.
So much like that, your second example, the other really high profile incident in the last couple of years was Ivan Toney, who was an English footballer who was I think he was investigated for over 230 different charges for gambling on games that he was in, games that he wasn't in, but also on 13 occasions he bet against the team he was playing for. Ooh. He bet on them to lose. So then you immediately have red flags about match fixing, whether or not he played in those games. The integrity of the Premier League was challenged, and they slapped him with an 8-month ban, which sort of ran right up until last season, and then he left the Premier League. Now plays in Saudi Arabia. So those are two, one slightly funnier than the other instances of where the integrity of sport is being challenged by sort of the sort of gambling epidemic.
Yeah. Well, that is so. Yeah, it's amazing that that's happening pretty recently. And, with the examples that I gave in the U.S., those are all examples of that kind of thing happening back when it was illegal across the country. There's one more example of that still to go, and that's a guy by the name of Tim Donaghy in 2007 was banned from the NBA because he bet on games. I don't know exactly how many, but it was between 2002 and 2007, so a period of 5 years. He bet on games that he was involved in, which is pretty important, especially when you know that Tim Donaghy was a referee.
No.
Yes.
Hey, great prestige. I didn't see that one coming. What a twist. Oh my god.
We got this was so bad the FBI got involved with it. He faced federal charges for this. This was a massive deal. And as we were talking about, sets up the precedent of, hey, a referee could be paid off. Why couldn't a sport be rigged? And this is why I was saying kind of back at the beginning of the episode that, we can't just dismiss the possibility that a game would ever be rigged by a referee, or not necessarily. I hate using that phrasing, rigged, because I think that implies a massive conspiracy of league offices to players to everything coming together for a predetermined outcome. But let's say putting their thumb on the scale to make sure a bet comes in. Yeah. That certainly could happen, and it happened back before sports gambling was legal in the in the U.S.
We in the PGMOL is the organization responsible for referees in the Premier League, and I think the rest of the English flight. A PGMOL referee by the name of David Coote was exposed at the end of last year. Somebody recorded him at a party saying how he really hated the Liverpool manager Jurgen Klopp. And this video leaked, and immediately everyone runs to see his record against Liverpool, and suddenly every yellow card, every red card, every penalty given against Liverpool comes under question. And he was thrown out. He was fired. It turns out there were some other pretty serious issues going on with David Coote at the same time. But yeah. We started this episode by saying, hey, these conspiracies about whether or not leagues can be rigged, they're so big they can't be true. But you're right, individual actors can move the dial slightly. And then we're talking about a complete loss of integrity, not just in the games that they're involved in, but if we can't trust the referees, if we can't trust the organizing, the federations, to deliver a fair product, then what's the point of sport?
Well, okay, and that's a great point, because one thing that I think we often forget now, again, in this era where sports betting is legal in the U.S. and is so ubiquitous, is just how taboo it was in the U.S. Before that. The leagues, especially the sports themselves, would never, with a 10-foot barge pole, touch anything remotely related to anything that even insinuated being in the presence of gambling.
Sure.
There's a reason, other than financial upside, because of population changes now, recently. There's a reason that there were not major professional teams in Las Vegas until very recently. The fact that gambling doesn't have the stigma it once did, and is certainly legal now, made those markets available. The Vegas Golden Knights wouldn't exist. The Raiders wouldn't have moved to Vegas. The Oakland A's wouldn't be moving to Vegas. Well, there's a lot of reasons they're moving there, but they wouldn't be moving to Vegas if that didn't exist. The Las Vegas Aces. I mean, there was a time where the NFL banned a commercial from going on the air because it was advertising the city of Las Vegas.
Wow, no way.
Yeah, it's amazing to think about. And any time that these commissioners of leagues were asked about gambling, they'd always say they want to protect the integrity of the league. That's the most important thing, which it should be. But it also brings us into another piece of this puzzle where one thing that we see all the time here in the conversation around U.S. sports is that there's so much financial strain on professional leagues now and teams because of the changing media habits, the money that was coming, the revenue that was coming in guaranteed from television contracts, is coming under threat because of changing viewership habits. This is a source of revenue that has all of a sudden come available because leagues can sell the data to their games, the rights to the data for their games. The NFL, I think the NFL and the NBA maybe both have deals that are in the billions of dollars with sportsbooks for the rights to their data. So it's real.
Similarly, in the Premier League, the incident I mentioned about Ivan Toney, who was banned. The Premier League banned him for 8 months. He was playing for a team whose shirt sponsor was Hollywood Bets.
Whoa.
One of 10 teams this year that has a gambling shirt sponsor. 10. Wow. Half of the Premier League teams are selling shirts that have gambling affiliate on their shirt sponsor, and they are selling them to kids. They are
Yeah.
selling them to vulnerable people who are growing up with it normalized. And yeah, obviously the clubs are taking that money because firstly, those companies have a lot of it, and they want to make sure that the Bet365 is spotted across the West Ham chest. You're right. The money's still coming into the sport somehow, and it's propping up these teams. One of the very few things that the Premier League has done really, really well in the last 10 years has been in 2023. They said no more gambling sites on shirt sponsors.
Oh, interesting.
Can't have them. Find a different sponsor. So I think that comes into effect in 2026. So everyone's current contracts will run through, but you can't re-sign with Bet365 or Paddy Power or whoever. That's a good step forward.
Interesting. That is a good step forward.
So the hypocrisy of letting a team have a gambling site on their chest, and the athlete wearing that gets banned. Which statement are you trying to make?
Right.
Are we?
And again,
is it?
Yeah, it becomes and these relationships become uncomfortably close because with as it gets as you get to the point where leagues and players and officials are they're people too. They're citizens that are subject to the same laws as you and me. Well, not actually. No, we are not subject to the same laws. No. That's not a good example. As me and my American friends, everybody has access to this stuff. So it is just as important as ever to make sure that the sport itself, like the integrity of it, is yes, it's protected, but also the illusion of the integrity, or the appearance of the integrity, is just as important as anything. Yeah. In Major League Baseball, I think it's just this past offseason, there was this current offseason, there was an umpire, one of the best umpires in the league, by the grades that outside data providers will grade the accuracy of umpires strike zone calls. This umpire was kicked out of the league this offseason because he shared a sports betting account with a professional poker player. Shohei Ohtani's translator, Shohei Ohtani, the best baseball player in the world, his interpreter was caught up in a huge betting ring, which Major League Baseball, that had them shaking in their boots because all of a sudden, oh my gosh, one of your best players might be, subject to this.
It was right before the World Series as well.
Yeah,
that whole story dropped. I thought the Dodgers were gonna tank after that.
Yeah, it could have been. Whether there wasn't really much evidence that Shohei was involved at all. It did seem like a situation where he was being taken advantage of by his interpreter, but the fact that story was in the headlines keeps planting seeds of doubt into this younger generation that is being flooded with sports gambling advertisements, that's participating in sports gambling at higher and higher levels. It's just such a big part of the conversation now. You run the risk of one or two issues really changing the way that people think about sports, and then the entire business and institution is just all called into question. So it's scary. Well, we don't have a ton of time left, so I want to make sure that we get into, not that we have a time limit on this, but I do want to make sure that we get to to an important part, which is kind of the mental health side of it, which is the predatory side of this that we said we'd come back to. We talked about already how certain people are being targeted, certainly young people, especially young men, and I don't think that we can have this conversation without talking about the international men's mental health crisis, where I had the number up here. In the U.S. in 2024, men make up 50% of the population, but nearly 80% of the suicides. There's all sorts of contributing factors to that I think are far too big for this podcast. But certainly, I'm not here to say that sports gambling companies or sports betting anything is the direct link there. But it certainly can't help when you're encouraging young men to make financially questionable at best decisions that are as easy as possible, sending them push notifications on their phones all the time, hearing messages from their favorite media personalities and their favorite athletes, that they could make it big if they, their ball knowledge comes through. Hey, way more about the game than the average person. You could make thousands and thousands of dollars.
That's such an awful one.
Yeah.
The part you call, I think in America it's called, like, you use the word parlay a lot. Mm-hmm. Over here we call them like accumulators, which I'm sure they're the same thing. But yeah, when it's like a measure of like how well you know the sport, like that becomes like an intellectual challenge instead of like a you're sort of taking out your the chance element, even though, as we said, sport is far less chance. I think that's a really vicious sort of play. One thing that I'll say is probably in a better state in the UK. We still get a lot of TV advertisements for betting houses and for betting services on your phone, but we also get like gamble aware ads, which run, I think, they're sponsored by the Gambling Commission, but often the gambling houses will run themselves, and they'll say, hey, yeah, do all of this, but when the tagline is, when the fun stops, stop. Don't chase your losses.
Yeah.
And actually seeing that on the TV, sandwiched between two ads where they're trying to, rinse you for your cash, it's a slightly more responsible way of going about it.
I mean,
I
was just saying, we do have some regulation where, like, actually it's kind of comical. You'll hear at the end of an ad, or you'll see at the bottom of the screen, like, all of the problem gambling helplines. Because, again, this is a patchwork of, there's no national law in sports betting. It's all state laws. Sure. So there's, like, every state has, like, a gambling crisis number. Or problem gambling helpline is what they'll call it. And, like, so you'll get a little bit of that, but there's no like PSAs or anything, which, I question what the efficacy of that would be without, also regulating the ability of a DraftKings, a FanDuel, Caesar Sportsbook, a BetMGM to come through and say, to be able to say, hey, you used to lose, you're one of our best customers, meaning that you've lost a lot of money to us. You haven't bet in a few weeks. Here's some free bets for you. Why don't you come on back?
Those are the worst.
PSAs are great, but it's hard to counteract the actual structure of the thing.
No, you're so right. And also, as I said, they're baked in. The reason that the betting companies make their own ads is so that they control that. They control the way that PSA is delivered.
Yeah.
But yeah, I genuinely think that gambling can enhance the entertainment value of a sports event, but you have to be so careful.
Yeah.
I don't actively gamble. I have done on horses, but never on football, never on anything where I was like, yeah, I know enough to get ahead in this. Because it's even in sport, that it's stacked against you.
Also, like,
so I'm sorry. The markets are there. The markets that are presented to you on your sports app are there just to rinse you a little bit. You're never presented with a, hey, definitely bet on Man City to beat Plymouth, which unfortunately they did today. It's a shame. The FA Cup lost a hero today. But yeah, I have nothing else to say on the ethical point on gambling.
Yeah.
If Yeah, just be careful.
Yeah,
oh my
I mean,
God, what a dangerous game.
Yeah, I wanna add two more things, and then we can wrap up. Unless you have anything else, which I think you just said you didn't. The NCAA, so the National Collegiate Athletics Association, they're people who put on March Madness. They did a survey a couple of years ago on young adults and sports betting. So it's their survey. They commissioned an independent commission to do it, but take that with as you will. They found that 58% of the 18 to 22-year-olds that they had surveyed had placed a bet on sports, and this was in 2023.
That's a big number.
It's a big number. And the other thing that I want to say is I want to make it very clear. I don't think that there is anything inherently bad or sinful, as we alluded to before, is how people look at it. I don't think there's anything inherently bad about sports betting. It adds enjoyment for people. It can be a healthy bit of fun for people. I have absolutely no problem with that. My problem lies with when you have corporations that make it predatory. And I'm not saying that all the people that work at those places are bad people or all have bad intentions. It just the way that things have progressed, and the way that these companies often the financial incentives are often such that it incentivizes them to be a little bit on the predatory side. So I wanted to get that out there. But yeah, any parting words before we move on?
If this is the last episode of Athlantic, some gambling syndicate got to us.
Oh,
This was it.
got my back now.
No, Adam, I am ready to charge through my sport math.
All right, let's do it. All right, let's get into it. Let's see if you can do better than I did last time. So a refresher for you and for everybody at home. This is the sport math category, or the sport math question. There are three clubs that share the streak for the longest current tenure in the EFL Championship. Those clubs are Bristol, Preston North End, and QPR. They've each been in the championship for the same amount of time. I want to know the number of years each of those three clubs have been in the championship consecutively in this stretch that they've been in. Take that number, put it to the power of the jersey number of the New York Yankee with the most hits in Yankees franchise history. Then I want you to add that total to the number of times that England have won the men's Six Nations. That, my friend, is your challenge.
Okay, so the last one is the one that I'm most confident on.
Okay.
I want to... So the England have won what is currently known as the Six Nations, a tied number with Wales. And I only know this because they said this in the beginning of a broadcast like 3 weeks ago, that England and Wales have both won 39 of what is now the Six Nations. It's only been the Six Nations for like the last couple of years, not like the last several years since we put Italy in. So if we're just counting since Italy, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I meant like the total. So yeah, what was the Five Nations, the home nations, all these.
Yeah. The rugby afternoon, as it was probably once known. So that number, I'm pretty sure, is 39 because we share it with Wales.
Okay.
The streak for QPR, Bristol City, and Preston is a really interesting one. I don't remember when Bristol City or Preston were promoted into the Championship. I definitely don't remember if they were ever relegated out of the Premier League or the top division. I do, though, remember that QPR were in the Premier League more recently, and I think they were relegated in the 2012-2013 year, which means their streak for being in the Championship would be 12 years.
Okay.
And that's as close as I'm going to get. The Yankees is a really fun one because the Yankees have retired more shirt numbers than I can count in actual numbers. And I know that some guy called... I could always remember the top 5, and I'm only blanking on 4 of them. And I'm pretty sure the number is in this 5. Some guy called Miller, I think is the first one. I don't know anything about him. Then Babe Ruth is in there. Joe DiMaggio's in there. Derek Jeter's in there. And the other one is in there. And I can picture the 4th one of those 5. And I think it's either Derek Jeter or that other one.
Okay.
But that doesn't matter because I don't need the name. I just need to know if...
Yeah.
I think the shirt number, is the number 4. Babe Ruth is definitely 3. And DiMaggio is definitely 5. And it's either 2 or 4. And I'm going to land on the guy... I think Derek Jeter or the number 4. And Derek Jeter's just ringing a very, very faint bell. So I'm going to say... Okay. 12 to the power of 4, add 39. I'm not super confident about this, but 12... Oh my god, to the power of... 12 to the power of 4 is 20,736. Plus 39 is 20,775. My official answer is 12 years, the number 4, and 39. And my final answer, which I'm pretty sure is going to be wrong, is 20,776. I'm that's 4 points in the bag. I've smashed it.
I appreciate that you think that I'm that creative, and or that evil that I would make the number in the 20,000s. So I decided early in this one that I was going to add an exponent because I thought it would be a fun way to break the mold, and then I realized, oh no, exponents can get massive very, very quickly. So I had to adjust, which is why I went with the jersey number of Derek Jeter. You were spot on with Derek Jeter. However, Derek Jeter did not wear number 4. He wore the number 2. So I was very impressed though by the retired numbers.
Number 4?
Number 4 is Lou Gehrig.
What's his name? Of course it is. Of course, because Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig, and DiMaggio were all in that dream team. No, they weren't necessarily in the same team, but I know that those are just 3 Yankee
legend
heroes.
Yes.
And Derek Jeter was far later,
yes.
right?
Derek Jeter retired 5 years ago, 5-6 years ago.
And Miller, number 1?
Billy Martin was the guy's name.
Martin.
Yeah,
whatever.
Billy Martin was the guy's name.
So I was looking for 2, but I landed on 4.
Yes.
I said it was 50-50, and I'm glad I got Jeter, but that sucks.
Yeah.
So I didn't need to times the first number by an exponent of 4. I needed to do it by 2, which would have been far more palatable a number.
Yes. Okay, so
did I get? Cool.
Let's just keep going. The 3 clubs, our 3 friends in QPR, Preston, and Bristol, have each been in the championship for 10 years. But the 2012 time frame is honestly, if I hadn't looked it up, that's probably what I would have assumed with QPR, just because of the Aguero goal. That's all that I.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh god! If I'd thought about that, you're right. That definitely couldn't have been the year. Wait. Okay, fine. Yep. Whatever. Okay. Beans.
So that was 10.
Did I get this?
So
10 to the parents. Yeah.
The Six Nations, because you just said that you you heard this on the broadcast, actually makes me question myself a little bit here. The number that I have is 29 between the home nations, 5 nations, and 6 nations. This may be where my historical knowledge is lacking, and I also have Wales with 28. So perhaps there's a different counting method here, and perhaps that question was therefore unfair.
Or
you're just wrong. Or you're just wrong, Harry.
I think I'm wrong. All right.
So there's a little bit of an I'm not sure, but I'm going to go ahead and say you're wrong. So if any of our listeners want to chime in and correct me on this one, or just laugh at Harry for getting a grand total of, let's see,
0.
10, 2, and 20, 0 points, then feel free to leave that comment right here on YouTube or right here on Spotify, wherever you're watching, wherever you're listening. Feel free to leave that comment or interact with us on TikTok or on YouTube Shorts or anywhere else. Maybe we're coming to other platforms soon. Maybe we're not. I don't know. We'll figure it out. But all I can say is we're now 11 episodes into this very, very fun project of Athlantic. This was a little bit different of an episode, as you could tell, and we appreciate you. Appreciate you being along with us for the ride.
I've had so much fun, even on the topics that are a little bit more somber. This has still been so good. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening. And we'll be right back. We'll be back very soon.
All right. Till next time.
See ya.
Harry has just informed me that in my excitement to make the lovely transition, the seamless transition out of this episode, that I forgot to reveal the number. 10 to the power of 2 is 100, 10 times 10, and then plus 29. So the answer I was looking for was 129.
Not 20,775.
Not 20,775. Okay, that's the addendum.